Okay, so today's webinar entitled Clean Energy Smart Investments, Optimizing Your Decarbonization Strategy. We're going to have a quick update from Enova, and then we'll dive right into the presentation. Like I said before, feel free to chime in with any questions that you might have, but we'll wrap it up before the hour. So if you don't know already, myself and Chris, we're key account advisors for all of our large business customers. We have, a wealth of experience in the utility as well as energy efficiency. So we're here as kind of your single point of contact for the utility in terms of billing and rates, ICI, energy assessments, you name it. We can kind of help you or point you in the right direction. So now what's new from Enova? I'm not sure if you know, we have conditions of service that kind of just dictates all of our accounts and what's required of you and what's required of us. So now the two utilities, we're merging our two conditions of service into one. So then we have to put it out for public consultation, which is open until actually tomorrow. Tomorrow's the last day for feedback. If you have any feedback on there, by all means, let your voice be heard using through that website there. Second of all, we were doing kind of a pilot, the demonstration project for our multi-market information platform is now live. This was supported by the Green Innovation Fund in partnership with other LDCs. So basically what it is using solar storage and loads to kind of simulate the market on a smaller scale. So this will kind of lead us towards more the distributor system operator model, which I won't dive into right now, but just to say it's another one step towards that. So if you have any questions about that, by all means, let me know afterwards. And lastly here, real quick, the Strategic Energy Management Program run by the Save on Energy. They're looking to start up a commercial retail customer cohort starting soon. So applications for that are due by July 19th. It's a 2-year commitment, cohort-based learning model at no charge. A lot of it's workshops, peer-to-peer learning. You can get some performance incentives for saving so much energy, and then you have a dedicated support coach that's there to help you through. The cool part about that is you get a free energy model of your building, which you can then use going forward to kind of monitor your energy use. All right. I think that's it from Enova. Chris, you think of anything else I covered? Right on. Okay. All right, let's dive right in there. Scott, I think you're going to take control. If so, I can stop my sharing.
Can everyone see that all right?
Yep.
Okay, terrific. So just to reiterate Andrew's point, by all means, I'll try to keep an eye out for raised hands, but if I miss them, feel free to just yell at me, and happy to stop and chat things through as we go along. And very pleased to be here this morning. Appreciate the invite. Going to speak largely about the myriad funding opportunities that exist and some of the newer developments occurring in terms of federal funding, but did also want to address just the general approach to decarbonization and some best practices that can keep things on a path that are more simple, consistent, and probably results in fewer headaches. So in that vein, probably the most important advice we have is just to step back and really put some thought into what is the organization trying to achieve, and sort of regardless of whether your organization's public sector, private sector, the three main pillars that really need to be considered are as you're undertaking, whether it's I call it energy transition, decarbonization, or really just retrofitting your energy systems. What are you trying to achieve from an operational perspective? And then from a financial perspective, what is the objective? And then from a sustainability or ESG perspective, what is trying to be achieved? There's a tendency amongst all of us to sort of start with a product or a technology, and something catches our imagination, whether that's lithium ion battery cars or solar panels or whatever that may be. The reality is that in order to achieve most organizations' long-term goals around electrification and decarbonization, there's going to be a requirement for a number of technologies to be brought to bear and for those to be integrated. And so rather than just jumping into a particular product, really worth stepping back and trying to establish what is the end goal, and then work back from that to say, all right, from a stepwise perspective, what does that then look like? It's probably not realistic to expect most organizations to do one big project that holistically addresses that end goal, but it's worth having that roadmap in mind as you step through, and not allow yourself to be constrained by whatever the immediate problem seems to be, or whatever the immediate financial constraints are. What is our budget going to permit us to do? The danger is in doing this on a piecemeal basis, just whack-a-mole, whatever pops up and seems to be the current problem. In the long run, that's going to make integration a lot more difficult, and it's going to make it a lot more costly. So as we step into a discussion of the various funding opportunities and tools that exist, I'm going to really focus on three in particular that have more recent developments that will be really relevant. But generally, just to walk you through the overall galaxy or constellation of possibilities here, there's the government energy transition funding side of things, and that includes the newly announced or newly updated investment tax credits, which I'll get into in more detail shortly. Lots of federal funding opportunities right now, particularly as the federal government comes to the end of its current mandate. It appears to be an effort to be pushing a lot of dollars out the door. And there are also some provincial funding streams that can generally be accessed through partnerships with utilities, and then there are also not-for-profit organizations that are making funds available, such as municipal organization like Federation of Canadian Municipalities that are also making funds available. From a low interest loans perspective, the big vehicle nationally is the Canada Infrastructure Bank. It has had challenges getting dollars out the door, due in part to the original process design, which required that they not write checks for less than $50 or $100 million. And so it was difficult to get dollars to smaller projects. That's still a challenge, although there are aggregators that are being assigned smaller chunks of money to be able to dole that out to local organizations. And there are other pathways as well, by teaming up with other organizations or other peers and putting together larger asks is another way of tapping into those dollars. But I expect we'll see some further evolution of those programs over the next year as they try to get more dollars out the door. From the private funding perspective, there are certainly traditional lenders out there in the forms of the banks. Although they typically follow a path of not wanting to lend you money unless you've got it, and will not typically take a lot of risk on energy projects. There are other organizations out there that are quite interested, such as insurance companies and investment funds that have got a lot of dollars that they're looking to deploy into low carbon technologies. It's seen as a very favorable investment. And the challenge there is finding an intermediary that can get their hands on those dollars and bring them to bear on the projects. Historically, that challenge has been, again, one of just a mismatch of size. If you're only doing a project that's a couple of $1 million, that's going to be a challenge for some of these mid-market funds in Canada, which again want to cut a big check, at least $10 million and often larger than that. I'll jump down to the bottom right, equipment leases, technologies and leases. Certainly, if you're looking for single technologies for an application, you just want to put solar on your roof or EV chargers out in the parking lot. A lot of technology vendors will implement those under long-term lease scenarios where you pay monthly for that project over the course of years. And then we'll get into some more detail on the middle right there on bundled energy as a service, where there are a number of organizations out there that are happy to put their capital up front and take a return off the project over the long term, so that there's a long-term alignment of interest there, and allows the organization to turn this into more of an operational cost rather than having to come up with the capital up front. So to look at the three in particular, starting with the clean technology investment tax credits, this is generally as a concept, something that the federal government's been talking about for a couple of years and has been under a lot of pressure from industry to implement in response to what the US did with their Inflation Reduction Act, where they've already been actively deploying dollars into the public and private sector to encourage organizations to electrify. And so there are two streams that the federal government has been working on. There's the clean technology investment tax credit, which is designed for taxable entities. And that covers a wide range of low carbon technologies, electrical as well as thermal. So can be used for generating electricity, storing electricity, charging vehicles, as well as facility heating and cooling. And that is, again, theoretically only accessible to taxable entities. There's a second stream that they've been working on, which is a 15% clean electricity investment tax credit that is being designed for non-taxable entities, so public sector, utilities, and so on. And it's designed only for electricity generation and storage. And it's running significantly behind in terms of the legislation. So the 30% ITC was just legislated at the end of the session here in June, shortly before Parliament packed up and went home for their extended vacations. The 15% ITC will likely not be legislated until 2025. And there is a risk that it gets tied up in electioneering as we approach a federal election, which can be no later than October 2025. In terms of the mechanisms for this, the tax credit terminology is a bit confusing, but it's not dependent upon how much tax an organization pays. This is a refundable credit, and essentially, if $1 is spent on an eligible technology, then for the clean technology ITC, the owner of that project makes a claim to the Canada Revenue Agency and will ultimately receive a check for 30% of it, so 30 cents on that dollar. The 30% ITC, as I mentioned, it is the law of the land now. What we're still waiting on for clarity is tax and accounting guidance from the Canada Revenue Agency. So we know that this investment tax credit is available. What's not entirely clear at this point is how that claim process will work, when you get the dollars back, and some questions around eligibility in addition to the monetization piece. So in order to get the full tax credit, there will be some requirements for the installer or constructor that is used to pay the prevailing wages in the region, some requirement for use of apprentices, formal apprentices, and that will allow folks to capture the full amount. there's more to say, but I'll just allow a chance for questions on that before I jump into more detail, because this is a pretty dense topic. Nothing there. Okay.
Not seeing any, no.
All right.
Scott, if I could jump in.
Sure.
At the bottom there, it talks about partnering to access both the 15% and the 30%. So is that stacking? And it sounded like in both cases, like one proponent needs to have the majority of the expenses. So how would that work if now you have two proponents needing to have a majority of expenses?
Sure. Yeah, and we'll get into the a stacking case study a little further on. But I guess the other key piece that we're waiting on in terms of this CRA guidance is to see how the agreements have to be designed. So it is the owner of it's the ownership of the project that determines the eligibility for the 30% versus the 15. And there needs to be some minimum ownership by a taxable entity in that project in order to be eligible for the 30% ITC. It is our expectation that non-taxable entities, so public sector entities, will be able to access the 30% ITC through a partnership. And that partnership will need to look something like that partner owning the equipment for some minimum period of time and having responsibility for operations and maintenance, and potentially taking some sort of operational risk. So that partner has to take the production risk on a solar project, for instance, that can't be borne directly by the site host. So it can't look just like a lease. That won't be eligible, but we'll have a better sense, hopefully in the next couple of months, as CRA publishes their guidance on exactly what an agreement or a partnership has to look like in order for a public sector entity to take advantage of the clean technology ITC. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, that does. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Max.
All right. And so yes, it's expected that these ITCs will be stackable with other funding streams, and that will really be the stackability will be influenced by the limitations of those other funding streams rather than the ITCs. So if you have grant funding for some portion of the amount, then you'll be able to claim the ITC on the unfunded amount. In terms of other available funding streams, this is just scratching the surface, but from a provincial perspective, the Grid Innovation Fund is really encouraging the local utilities to be working with key accounts in the communities to come up with more innovative ways to access low carbon energy on a local basis. And so there are opportunities to do some things differently that start pushing the limits imposed by existing regulation. An example of this might be right now the policy around where you can generate and use energy is quite limiting in this province. So if you want to generate solar electricity on for a particular building, it has to be generated on that site. It can't be generated elsewhere and then delivered to your site, which would be known as virtual net metering. The only thing that's permitted presently is net metering on site, where you generate it on site and consume it there. This Grid Innovation Fund is opening the door to start doing pilots that would allow for generation in one place and consumption elsewhere. And that would just be one example. And I'm not going to pretend that's an easy road to follow, but increasingly multi-site owners will be working with the utilities to see what's possible as Ontario and its market evolve to look more like some of the other markets that are less restrictive. The Green Industrial Facilities and Manufacturing Program is actually, it's great timing, has just opened up again, its next call for funding. And I believe the next call closes August 30th. This is specifically designed for industrial and manufacturing. And this can be used for studies and for capital. And it's on a matching basis. There is a minimum contribution required from the organization that's receiving the funding on a 50-50 basis. The Green Municipal Fund, which would be one that would be apply more to the municipal sector, and covers a wide range of energy and energy adjacent applications. So conservation, energy to waste, or waste energy rather, and that sort of thing. And then the Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Program, which has had a number of iterations over the last few years, has also just announced another funding window that has opened. I can't remember when that one closes. I don't know if Andrew, Brittany, or Chris want to chime in, or anybody else that happens to know. But that is one where I don't have a sense at the moment of which types of projects that will fund. Historically, it is addressed a whole range of applications, including public charging, fleet charging, and on street, private property. And so that's an interesting one to look at if you're looking to do some fleet electrification. There are a couple of ways of tackling that. Either the host site can apply for that funding. If you are looking at partnering to access that and stack it with other opportunities, then you probably want to apply for that funding in collaboration with your partner. Because I see Brittany said here, ZVIP open until September 19th. Because the fine print in all of these tends to be that the funding has to be claimed by whoever is going to own the equipment or the energy system, not by generally not by who is going to own the facility. But that's not a hard and fast rule. You really need to look at the fine print on a given funding stream to be able to figure out how to optimize that. So in terms of the private sector solutions, we've touched on this already as part of the investment tax credit, but as a market-based approach, if an organization doesn't have the upfront capital to do something or wants to look at converting that long-term capital and operating cost into a bundled monthly charge, then this is a solution that exists in the marketplace from a number of different vendors. And essentially the way it works is you partner with this third party for the delivery of whatever the technology solutions are. This partner will take responsibility for the design build, usually the procurement, although there are various partnering models depending on what your organization's procurement rules are. So it's possible to integrate this with an open procurement that complies with, for instance, the broader public sector procurement rules. The partner will then pay for the equipment, install it as a turnkey solution, and take responsibility for long-term operations and maintenance. And the commercial design can take different forms depending on the technology. It could be just a monthly fee that you pay out over some number of years, 5, 10, 20, 25. Or it could be done on a per unit basis, so a per unit of energy. And it's very common with solar projects to do these through a third-party power purchase agreement, so that the host site just pays for the energy received on a per kilowatt hour basis that essentially looks just like your utility bill. And so it becomes a fairly easy thing to compare against the utility bill and manage accordingly. And there are also models that are more common with the public sector. Well, some organizations will come in and do it on a shared saving basis instead. So instead of the organization having to commit to a minimum spend, as savings are realized, then there's an obligation to pay the partner out of those savings. The advantages of this approach are an ability to outsource a lot of risks onto that partner. So the technology risk, construction risk, operational risks, as well as just budget and schedule risk around the development of the project as well. Typically, it's possible to enter into an agreement with the third party where once you've agreed upon whatever that price is going to be monthly or on a per kilowatt hour basis, then it's the partner's problem if that project goes over budget, assuming it's things within their control, or if the project they've designed doesn't live up to its design criteria, then again, they're the ones that have to swallow that cost. So essentially, it gives you one throat to choke for all of these issues rather than having to, as an organization, worry about the discrete pieces of the design and the installation and the financing piece. So it reduces the site owner's risk of having a bunch of service providers pointing their fingers at each other. But it's primarily based around this long-term financing and operations piece, because certainly you can come up with contracting models if that still reduce that risk if you're looking to build it yourselves. And the other feature of a lot of these energy as a service contracts, provided they're designed correctly, allow an organization to have this treated as an off-balance sheet financing. So it doesn't impair the finances of the organization, keeps a healthier looking balance sheet, and it's somebody else that's taking that credit risk on their balance sheet. In terms of best practices, the types of organizations that are offering this are broad, different sizes, coming from different places. You'll find there are constructors offering this, there are technology vendors, there are utility affiliates. And so it's important to, again, as part of your holistic view and long-term approach to taking advantage of these funding streams and market-based tools, to think about what is that ultimate project going to look like so that you don't end up entering into individual energy as a service agreement for individual components, because there are solar providers out there that will do one of these for you, but don't necessarily have expertise in heat pumps or geothermal as you're looking to decarbonize your facilities heating and cooling. So if you think that your long-term vision for a given facility is going to include renewable energy, low carbon heating and cooling, EV charging, then probably want to look at a partner that's going to be in a position to deliver all of those things, rather than, again, having to worry about having a whole bunch of different partners that have got pieces of the system. And ultimately, you're going to want all of these systems to integrate well at the electrical panel. And from an optimization perspective, as you look to turn your building up and down to respond to peaks on the system and financial incentives. And so you want to think about that end state before you enter into any specific agreements around particular technologies. And then the other thing is just to think about those long-term objectives and how do you align the interest of that energy as a service partner with your own organization's interests in the long term. It's quite typical to see arrangements where it may look like, okay, turnkey solution and then 2 to 5 years of operations. And that's usually enough time to iron out a lot of the challenges that come with bringing one of these systems on board and dealing with the various gremlins in the system. But a often having a longer term potential for that operational maintenance partnership ensures that the initial design of that system is going to be more robust. If somebody's going to have to be accountable for this thing in 8-10 years, it's more likely they're going to design that appropriately. You don't want to create an incentive for somebody to build a system that's only really going to operate well as long as they're operating it for 2 or 3 years. So I'm sure that's not really an epiphany to most folks, but sometimes it's worth being reminded. So in terms of finding resources, just throwing up some places to go. Certainly, Chris and Andrew with Enova are a great place to start. Not-for-profits like Sustainable Waterloo Region can be a really great resource for public and private sector organizations. Certainly, if you've got questions after this, happy to help you out with ideas on where to go for potential funding streams. The Ontario Energy Board, who's the regulator of energy systems in the province, as well as the IESO, who operate the electrical system, also have information on their websites. And then if there's interest after this presentation, happy to have Brittany give everybody a quick preview of this business benefits finder, which is not ours, not proprietary to us, but it is a bit of a clearinghouse for funding that exists out there, and so might be a useful tool. And so we'll remind everybody at the end here, if you're interested, then Brittany can put it up on screen and just quickly give you a little run through there. In terms of demonstration of stacking some of these incentives and funding opportunities, I encourage you not to focus too much on the specific numbers in a business case. In this case, this is a modified real-life example of a public sector organization that is going to be installing some high-speed EV infrastructure, and they are not able to take advantage of the 30% ITC, which is the one that will provide a refundable tax credit for EV charging as a non-taxable entity. So this needs to be accessed through a partnership. And then there's an opportunity in that partnership to then have that partner apply ZBIP grants as well. So when this organization was looking at the economics of if they were to do this themselves and finance it using their lower cost of debt, they would have to incur the full cost of the $600,000 project capex. If that is just amortized out over the course of the 10-year life of the equipment, then that would equate to $5,000 a month. There would be a $300 a month O&M cost that includes software fees from the equipment OEM, replacement of filters and that kind of thing over the course of the year. At 5%, the monthly financing cost on this on a straight line pay down of that $600,000 principal would equate to about $1,300 a month. And so their average monthly cost over that 10 years would be $6,600. This doesn't get into some of the nifty things that can be done around accelerated depreciation and whatnot, intended to keep it simple, but give you a sense of how they were comparing that against partnering with an energy as a service provider that already had access to the zero emission vehicle incentive program grants, which were equate to, in this case, $75,000 per connector. So take the initial project capex. The partner is then able to claim $225,000 in grants, also apply a 30% tax credit to the unfunded portion of that. So 30% times 600 minus 225. And so the net on that is $262,500 that partner is having to put up in terms of capital. They then take responsibility for the financing, operations, and so on. And what that looks like is a charge to this public sector entity is a pretty significant savings on a monthly basis. In this case, what the 30% tax credit and the grants are allowing that partner to do are to cover the financing costs, also get a return on their money, and provide some savings to the public sector entity. If this were a private sector entity, that private sector entity could elect to just access those tax credits themselves. I should note there is nothing to prevent the public sector entity from getting the ZVIP grants and at least having that reduction. But the nuance here is that the grants and the tax credits have to be claimed by the same entity in order to be able to stack them. And so the economics in the case of a private sector entity were to do this, they could end up having that net capital cost of $262,500. And then in that case, if they didn't want to partner with an energy as a service partner, then that entity would take on the monthly O&M costs and the financing risks. And this is just one scenario looking at one grant funding stream plus application of tax credits. There are any number of permutations, and there are different federal and provincial funding streams that allow stacking of those different streams so that you can add them up to reduce the total capital cost. Any questions on this? Okay. I'll just have to assume it was really clear or really confusing. So in terms of what this all means, there are really meaningful economic incentives to take action now. The funding streams from the federal government are assured until the next election. If we were to see a change in government, then all bets are off. Don't know what that'll look like. From an investment tax credit perspective, this is something that has bipartisan support in the US when they went and implemented this, and actually has a long history of bipartisan support with similar measures in the US. There are more Republican states that have used tax credits for wind and solar than Democratic ones historically. In Canada, it's not quite so clear. The official opposition is remaining silent on their view on these tax credits. And so what we can say is that the 30% tax credit is in place now. We don't know whether the 15% tax credit will get over the line. And if a new government were to come in and decided we're going to be in opposition to it, then it would likely take 6 to 12 months after they're in place to start unwinding this. And it's likely that with any change in government, they'll likely look to see what the uptake is. But I think the short of it is that there's certainly money on the table now, and it's not a bad idea to think about taking advantage of it. And recognize that most organizations are subject to budget cycles and limitations. And this is where partnering or looking at different commercial structures can help get around some of those limitations, so that your organization may not have had something in the budget until 3 years out to put solar on the building. Well, whether it's through leases or partnerships or some of these other funding streams, there's maybe an opportunity to think differently and pull those projects forward. And it is aligning nicely with the declining cost of technology curves as well. Solar somehow has continued to drop. And so there are really interesting opportunities to buy solar at good value these days. with the caveat that supply chains can be a bit long, as the US is making tremendous amount of investment on the back of these tax credits. And what this 30% tax credit is also doing is helping to push marginal business cases over the line. So in a lot of cases, solar was already paying for itself as part of a business case where it didn't require incentives. This now really can make it a winner and create an opportunity to outsource a lot of that risk onto somebody else. In the case of some of the heating and cooling technologies, it creates an opportunity to have a business case that quote unquote pencils now, rather than having to wait for the cost of those technologies to decline further. And so just quickly, in terms of who we are, GRE is an energy transition project developer. We take a broader view and are not tied to a particular technology. And so we do work with clients on energy as a service solution. And so happy to answer questions about that if it does come up. Now, if there's an interest from the group, we can have Brittany put up that link to the business funding finder and give you a quick walkthrough of that, where to look.
Sounds good. We got a few minutes here.
Great. Then just give me one moment while I share my screen with you. So as Scott said, we are not the owners of this website, and this is a Government of Canada initiative. What I found is it's very useful. You answer a few questions, create a little story, as they call it, and they spit you out all kinds of information. So I'm just going to model it on just a little bit of stuff that GRE does. So as we're going through it, we're going to look for grants, funding, maybe some tax credits as well. My business, they're asking kind of what we're looking for. I want all amounts. Give me as much money as possible. My main goal here is to reduce pollution or improve energy efficiency. As you can see, you can select all kinds of options here depending on what your business needs are. And then they want to know about where you're from so they can tailor your results. Manitoba might have different incentives than Ontario does, for instance. We are looking at the utilities for electricity. And then they kind of want to know about your company in general. So we're just going to put in some information here. We're incorporated. We're a small team. We're for profit. We're owned by Canadians. And we want to show only programs accepting clients. As you can see, they've whittled it down to only 9. There can be hundreds of them depending on what you're looking for. What's nice about this website is that it kind of breaks it out into each different version. So you have your tax credit, your funding. They didn't find any tax credits. The ITCs, they're too new. They haven't shown up on the website yet. I keep refreshing, waiting for them to do so. Give you some capital investment opportunities, advice, facilities that you can work with. What's nice is that it gives you a lot of information in one small area. So we're looking here, this is the Green Industrial Facilities Manufacturing Program, GIFMP, as well as the Zero Emissions one, that both of which Scott was talking about earlier. So say we want to look at the GIFMP. It gives you a real clear snapshot of what it is, who is accessible, what the money is, the limits, the projects, how it all works. And then you can easily just say, visit the program website, and it'll bring you right to it. It's a great resource to use if you're not sure what's out there and you're like, I'm working on a certain project. I wonder if there's anything that can help me out. And it's just one concise area. That's basically it. You can find it if you just Google Business Benefits Finder. It's one of the first things to show up. The link is a little bit cumbersome, so I won't read that off to you. But that's that. If there's any questions, I'm more than happy to field them. But for the most part, it's a very simple website to use that's been helpful in a lot of different things that I've done here.
Brittany,
I'll add that this is a nice tool that is really advanced the aggregation of funding opportunities in one place. It is federally focused, and so doesn't capture all of the funding opportunities that are out there. And that certainly remains a challenge within this space, is being able to keep one's finger on the pulse of every funding opportunity and tax credit that exists out there. So the one best practice we could share is talk to as many people as possible. We showed a little constellation of folks that might have information. I would talk to all of those, talk to your peers, and there are constantly new opportunities cropping up. Very often they're for pretty narrow application windows. And so even for an organization like ours, where we're always trying to keep on top of the latest and greatest and what funding opportunities are out there, we're not able to stay on top of it all. So the more folks you talk to, the more likely you are to catch all the relevant opportunities. And that's probably not satisfying, but it's the reality.
I was just going to ask if you had to have a login to go through that exercise, or no?
No, you don't. There is an option if you do sign in. It's just they send you a link to your email and they'll save your story so that you can keep going back in and you don't have to fill out all that information over and over again. But you don't need to have a login. You can just access it just through the web.
I mean, I saw you close down that little pop-up window. How satisfied are you with this website here?
I mean, I would give it a solid 4 because it doesn't have all of the municipality stuff as Scott was talking about, and they're a bit slow to update it with the investment tax credits that got updated a couple weeks ago. But it's an excellent start. I've come across a bunch of things on there that I did not know existed and could help potential clients. So a solid 4 out of 5.
Cool. Scott, Ken's got a couple questions for you. I think we have some time. We got 8 minutes to go, but yeah, go right ahead, Ken.
Yeah, Scott, solve all my problems in 8 minutes, please. First question, big picture, long term, you get your buildings nice and efficient, and some sort of benchmark comes along that is not achievable without what I would call offsite generation. Is there any, like, we're a landowner, we own residential high rises. I don't mind investing in advance of something that I might take benefit of 15, 20 years from now. Anything on the horizon that's worth spending money on that will eventually feed into benchmarking?
Yeah, it's there's certainly no clear answer. The province has been talking about energy market reform for probably a decade now, and it goes in fits and spurts. One of the new policy initiatives that is being introduced is virtual net metering for large corporates. That's going to open up and change the landscape. And certainly if we look to other jurisdictions, there's been more of a movement towards community net metering and virtual net metering. So that'll come at some point. I think what we're advising some of the clients that we work with is to not necessarily plan to fully decarbonize or have dedicated renewable generation on every single site that you have, and you've got to put 10 kilowatts here and 10 kilowatts there. That it probably makes sense to take a more strategic approach where take care of the big sites and design those in a way that are modular so that maybe those can be used to serve some of your other sites in the future. In terms of what it looks like for a benchmarking or that you'll have to achieve, unfortunately that seems to be that it'll be continue to be driven by the unique aspects of a given industry or market. So publicly listed organizations will look to comply with some sort of standard ESG targets, but we're certainly not hearing anything about even if there were a change in government provincially where there would be a formal carbon market with clear benchmarks for everybody in this market. It still looks to be mostly on a voluntary basis, or as people are looking to try and support the needs of their customers or comply with their customers' supply chain based objectives, or in the public sector commitments made for decarbonization. That was a long way of saying, I think, focus on the big ones, look at making those solutions scalable, and to take advantage of future opportunities. And the only other sort of near certainty I could share is that we are on a path for electricity from the grid to get more expensive in this province. I don't think that's shocking to anybody. Historically, it has escalated above the rate of inflation. I think the 10 years preceding COVID, it was something like 6.5% per year. From a macroeconomic perspective, demand is increasing. Supply is going to shrink in the near term when Pickering comes offline. That's being backfilled by gas, which is going to make the carbon intensity of the grid worse and potentially more costly. The long-term solution the province is looking at from a supply perspective is more large centralized nuclear power plants that are going to raise the cost of energy even further. Within North America, every single jurisdiction, bar none, the cheapest form of generation is either solar or wind. And we recognize that in order to have a stable, reliable system, that has to be integrated with other technologies. But what that means is there's a very real opportunity to put in renewables at individual sites locally to provide a hedge against increasing electricity and gas prices in the future, and to have it really take control of your own budget certainty in the coming years. So I think there's a strong story and favorable headwinds that will continue to support investments in these sorts of technologies, regardless of government. Did that help?
Yep. I have a second question that is much longer, and your answer will probably be much longer. So I will defer to Andrew and how you want to. I think you're out of time, right?
Yeah, we can wrap it up to the general population here, and then we can continue on with conversation. Ken and Scott on this Zoom call. It's no problem with me. So just real quick, thanks everyone for attending today's webinar. If you have any questions, by all means, please reach out, let us know. I'll send a copy of this presentation and slide deck to everybody, and by all means, forward that amongst your team as you see fit. That's it. So if you either stick around and hear the rest of this this conversation, or enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
I appreciate you extending. Should I fire away to Scott?
All set.
So in general, we have a variety of ages of buildings. There's some low-hanging fruit. Some buildings are due for a major boiler retrofit, and you look at rebates, you look at costs, get some engineers to do some studies, and it's very easy to justify why one should decarbonize a boiler room and spend money, and you have to do it anyway. So what's happening at the moment is engineers tend